The amber glow of the bar's lighting caught the rim of his whiskey glass, casting a small, perfect halo on the polished wood. For Leo, it was the only holy thing in this entire tedious setup. He swirled the liquid, watching the ice cubes clink like tiny, transparent dice. Another blind date. Another hour of polite interrogation masked as conversation. The inevitable exchange of curated life highlights. The quiet sigh of relief when it was over. He'd agreed to this one because his sister had been insistent, her voice teetering on the edge of hysteria. Just meet her, Leo. She's different. She's lovely. And you're starting to collect dust, so here he was, dust and all, waiting for a woman named Alara. The door to the bar opened, and a swirl of crisp autumn air entered first, carrying in a woman wrapped in a deep blue coat. She paused, her eyes scanning the room, and for a fleeting second they met his. There was no shy smile, no tentative wave, just a look, steady and direct, that seemed to still the very air around him. She was beautiful, but in a way that felt like a remembered dream. With eyes the color of a twilight sky and dark hair that fell in soft waves around her shoulders. She walked over, her movements graceful and assured. Leo? He stood a little too quickly, the practiced charm sliding onto his face like a well-worn mask. Alara? It's a pleasure. He pulled out her chair. Thank you, she said, her voice a soft alto that held a curious note of familiarity. She slid out of her coat, revealing a simple black dress. As she sat, her perfume reached him, a faint scent of jasmine and rain, something that tugged at a memory so deep and buried, it felt like a phantom limb. The initial pleasantries were exchanged. She was a conservator, she said, working with damaged paintings and ancient texts, piecing together stories that time had tried to erase. Leo, an architect, found himself genuinely intrigued, the script of his usual date night boredom forgotten. There's a quiet drama in restoration, she said, cradling her glass of red wine. You're not just fixing a tear or cleaning grime. You're having a conversation with the artist, with everyone who ever loved the piece enough to keep it. You're honoring a history of love. Leo felt a strange tightness in his chest. Her words, the intensity in her gaze, felt directed at something far more personal than art. That's a beautiful way to see it, he replied, his own voice softer than he intended. I build spaces for the future. You preserve whispers from the past. A small, enigmatic smile played on her lips. Perhaps the past and future aren't as separate as we think. The conversation flowed, effortless and deep. They spoke of their passions, their fears, the small absurdities of life. Leo found himself laughing, truly laughing, for the first time in years. He watched the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. A gesture that felt hauntingly intimate. This wasn't the stilted dance of a blind date. This felt like a reunion. It felt like coming home. How is this possible? He thought, his mind reeling. She's a stranger. But she doesn't feel like one. She feels like the answer to a question I forgot I was asking. It was in a lull in the conversation, as they both looked at each other, the air thick with an unspoken connection, that she did it. She reached across the table, her fingers gently brushing against the back of his left hand. Her touch was electric, a jolt that traveled straight to his heart, and then she said it. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it shattered the perfect bubble of the evening like a hammer through stained glass. You don't remember me, do you? The world screeched to a halt. The ambient jazz, the murmur of other patrons, the clinking of glasses. It all faded into a dull, roaring silence. Leo stared at her, his charming mask completely gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated confusion. Remember you? He echoed, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. The tug-of-war memory, the sense of familiarity. It hadn't been déjà vu. It had been a ghost. Alara's hand retreated slowly back to her side of the table, the luminous warmth in her eyes dimmed, replaced by a profound ancient sorrow that made Leo's stomach clench. That sorrow was real. It had weight, and it was directed at him. I'm sorry, he stammered, his mind frantically flipping through the mental files of his life. College, a past project, a friend of a friend, nothing. Her face was a beautiful, agonizing blank in the ledger of his history. Should I? A single, perfect tear escaped the corner of her eye. She didn't bother to wipe it away. It traced a path down her cheek, a tiny, glistening testament to a pain he couldn't comprehend. It was a long time ago, she said, her voice thick with an emotion that threatened to choke her. The summer after high school. Willow Creek Camp. Willow Creek. The name landed like a physical blow. A kaleidoscope of images flashed in his mind. The scent of pine needles, the chill of a mountain lake, bonfire smoke in his clothes. A summer of freedom, of first loves, and his blood ran cold. There was a girl, a quiet, shy girl with glasses and a love for sketching. She'd been in his canoeing group. They'd talked for hours by the lake, under a blanket of stars so thick you felt you could reach up and scoop them into your hands. He'd been Leo, the confident, popular lifeguard. She'd been Ilara. The name fit, but the memory was foggy, a watercolor painting left in the rain. He remembered promising to write. He remembered a kiss, sweet and fumbling, behind the arts and crafts cabin on the last night. And then he remembered coming home, the whirlwind of college preparation, meeting Sarah, the woman he would eventually marry, and the camp, and the shy girl with the sketchbook, fading into the inconsequential backdrop of his youth. Ilara, he whispered, her name a prayer and an apology on his lips. She saw the dawning recognition in his eyes, and a sad broken smile touched her mouth. You told me I had galaxies in my eyes, she said softly. You said you'd never forget me. The weight of those forgotten words crushed him. He had said them. He had meant them in that moment under those stars. But he had forgotten. He had built a life, a marriage, a career, and he had completely erased her. I didn't. He tried, but the words wouldn't come. What could he possibly say? I'm sorry I forgot the girl I promised to remember. I'm sorry your galaxy was just a summer fling to me. It's okay, she said, but it was the least okay thing in the world. People forget. It was a long time ago. But as she looked at him, her gaze holding his with an unbearable intensity, he knew with a terrifying certainty that for her, it wasn't. For her, that summer had been everything. The foundation of something. The memory he had casually discarded had been a cornerstone of her life. The romantic drama of the evening had twisted into a devastating tragedy, and he was the unwitting villain, and he had no idea what the next act would bring. The walk to her apartment was a silent, funereal procession. The crisp autumn air that had felt invigorating hours ago now bit with a cruel chill. Leaves, vibrant and red, skittered across the pavement like discarded memories. Leo's mind was a storm of shame and confusion, each step heavier than the last. He stole glances at Ilara, her profile etched against the city lights, a statue of quiet grief. How could I have forgotten? The question was a drumbeat in his skull. He remembered Sarah with cinematic clarity. Their first date, their wedding day, the way she laughed. Ilara had been reduced to a ghost, a footnote, and yet here she was, flesh and blood, her pain a tangible force that filled the space between them. They reached a brownstone, ivy clinging to its brick face. She led him up a narrow flight of stairs to her apartment without a word. The door clicked shut, sealing them in a space that was unmistakably, profoundly her. The air smelled of turpentine, old paper, and that faint, haunting jasmine. Canvases leaned against walls, both finished and in progress. Books were stacked in teetering towers. It was a beautiful, creative chaos. Would you like some tea? She asked, her voice carefully neutral, a conservator assessing the damage. No. Thank you. He stood awkwardly in the center of the living room, feeling like an intruder. Ilara, I don't know what to say. I feel like a monster. She turned to face him, her arms crossed over her chest as if holding herself together. You're not a monster, Leo. You were 18. You moved on. She gestured to a small framed sketch on the wall near the door. I was the one who didn't. He moved closer. It was a pencil drawing, expertly rendered, of a younger version of himself. He was leaning against a canoe paddle, laughing, the sun catching the edges of his hair. The detail was breathtaking. The love in every stroke was palpable. It was the Leo of that summer, preserved forever by her hand. You drew this? He breathed, his throat tight. I drew everything that summer, she said softly, coming to stand beside him. It was the first time I felt really seen, by you. The dam inside him broke. Ilara, if I had known, if I had any idea, what? She challenged gently, her twilight eyes searching his. What would you have done? Written a few letters? Called? We were kids. Your life went one way, mine went another. She paused, her gaze drifting to a closed door down the short hallway. Mostly. A cold dread, entirely new and more terrifying than simple guilt, began to creep up his spine. Mostly. She saw the question in his eyes. She took a deep, shuddering breath, a breath that seemed to draw on the last of her courage. You asked me earlier why I do restoration work. It's not just about art, Leo. It's about saving things that are precious, preserving a truth even if it's a broken one. She walked toward the closed door and placed her hand on the knob. My life didn't just go another way after that summer. It split in two. There was the before and the after. You were the before. She opened the door. It wasn't a bedroom or a study. It was a small room, bathed in the soft glow of a nightlight shaped like a rocket ship. The walls were painted a soft blue, and scattered on the floor were toy cars and wooden blocks, and in the center of the room, tucked under a blanket covered in cartoon constellations, was a little boy. Leo's heart stopped. He took an involuntary step into the room, his architect's eyes taking in the details. The dark, unruly hair so like his own, the shape of the nose, the curve of the cheek currently flushed with sleep. Ilara's voice was a fragile thread behind him. His name is Sam. He's 7. 7. The math was brutal and instantaneous. Summer after high school, 7 years ago, the world tilted on its axis. The air was sucked from his lungs. He gripped the doorframe, his knees suddenly weak. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the sleeping child. His child, he rasped, the word a dry croak. You never told me. How could I? She whispered, her own tears flowing freely now. You were gone. You were at college. You were in love with someone else. What was I supposed to do? Show up and shatter your life? I tried to call once, a few months later. Your mother answered. She said you were blossoming and so happy with your new girlfriend. She politely took my number. You never called back. He remembered his mother handing him a slip of paper with a name he didn't recognize. He'd been on his way out to see Sarah. He'd crumpled it and thrown it away. He had thrown away his son. The twist wasn't just that he had forgotten her. The twist was that his forgetting had consequences. It had a face, a name, a sleeping form in a rocket ship-lit room. He turned to look at Ilara, truly seeing her for the first time all over again. He saw not just the woman from the blind date, not just the girl from the summer camp, but a mother. A woman who had carried this secret, this love, this monumental truth all on her own for 7 years. She had raised their son, preserved the memory of a boy who forgot her, and somehow found the strength to walk back into his life, not with anger, but with a heartbreaking question. You don't remember me, do you? It was no longer about a summer fling. It was about the father of her child. It was about a boy who would one day ask about his dad, and a man who had no memory of his son's existence. Leo sank to his knees in the hallway, the weight of it all finally buckling him. The heartbreaking romantic drama was over. This was something else entirely, a life-altering, soul-shattering revelation. The past wasn't just a memory to be recalled. It was a living, breathing boy, and his future was a door that had just been blown wide open, leaving Leo shattered on the threshold.